So it sounds like you kind of treat it more like a PvP situation in a sense, right? Where maybe you're not out to get the players. I don't think I would ever get that like
No.
feeling from you, right? Where like you're like I'm out to kill you guys, but you definitely play against us or play against your players like in a PvP type combat. You're like, okay, strategically, like how can I eliminate, um, how can I split the party up, pinpoint all these weaknesses? How do I chink their armor, right? Like, how do I get through that? So,
Well, and
yeah.
similar to how the players should play as well is kind of I do play very much as a DM like I would as a player. I think
Yeah.
of if I were a group of players going up against essentially this group of players, which are the players playing the D&D campaign, what would be the best strategy? How do I separate people to like pick them off? How do I keep my people alive? You got to think the same because the people the enemies you're putting up against your players are living, breathing, you know,
Right.
enemies.
Yeah.
And so they should ought to think the same or similarly strategically, unless they're goblins and they're a lot more disorganized.
Yeah. No, and I think that's something that's interesting that you definitely should take into account, right? Like, what's the intelligence and wisdom levels of my enemies that I'm facing these characters, or that I'm throwing at my players. Um, because like somebody like a mind flayer is going to be a very different encounter, right? Like you're playing chess with that guy. he's
Oh yeah.
he's like he's moving pieces on the board. Like he's going to be a very difficult person to outsmart and like defeat. Whereas like if you got spiders, they just want to feed on you, right? Like they're just hungry, man. So like of course they're just going to keep coming in waves until you know you burn one of the big ones to the ground, and the little ones start to scatter, or whatever it may be, right? So is that something that you take into account as well, like the intelligence or like the play style of your enemies?
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I don't actually plan around that when I'm thinking about,
Mm.
the session beforehand. But during the session, a lot of times when I improv, I'll take into account their intelligence. It's like how much information, how smart would this person be, in this scenario to make this decision. And so for me, that's usually a last minute look at. Um, I definitely look at the stats for, specifics on their combat, but when it comes to the actual improvisation in the moment, I do look at that a little bit more last minute to decide whether or not certain things would happen.